Celia will die if she doesn't cast a spell to go back to her time. But everything has changed since her feelings has grown for Binge and the family she's always wanted. And then it happened.
He said he loved her, then died hours later. Now Celia's unraveling, trapped between timelines and heartbroken. Their first date was supposed to be the beginning. Instead, it might be the end of everything. Let's take a look as we enter. We're flashing forward to 2025 Seoul. The office was unusually still, the kind of stillness that made every sound feel too sharp. Min-jae walked alongside of Celia's mother, his expression controlled, but unmistakably tense. He wasn't frantic, he never was, but there was a weight behind every word he spoke. "I don't want to alarm you," he said quietly, "but the state of mind that she was in last time I saw her, and with the suicide rates the way that they are, we need to treat this very seriously," he said. Celia's mother nodded shakily, holding her purse close to her chest. "I just want to know where she is," she whispered. "We'll definitely find out," Min-jae said. His voice was steady, calm, the way he always sounded when he was gathering information and taking charge. "Han-rae might know something," he said. "She pays attention to things people don't see." They reached the office door. Min-jae knocked once out of courtesy, then he opened it. Han-rae was inside, seated at the table, her posture straight, hands folded, expression unreadable. She lifted her eyes as they entered. Before Min-jae could speak, as the door began to close softly behind them and then click shut, Celia's mother stepped all the way inside. Then she froze. Her breath caught. She stared at Han-rae as if she was seeing a ghost. "You?" she whispered. Her eyes widened with recognition she couldn't explain. "You... what is going on?" Han-rae didn't flinch, didn't move, didn't look surprised. Her voice came out level, calm, almost gentle. "Nothing you didn't ask me to perform," she said. The mother's hand flew to her mouth, shaken. Min-jae looked between them, stunned by the familiarity. He straightened his posture. "What on earth does that mean?" he asked. Not panicked, but intensely focused. Celia's mother stepped closer. "Is my daughter safe?" she asked, voice trembling. Han-rae looked at her directly, her tone softening. "Yes, I'm sure she's safe." She paused, a long, unsettling pause. "But I don't know for how long." Min-jae inhaled sharply, the closest he ever came to showing fear. "I want an explanation right now," he said firmly. "All of it, now." Han-rae finally stood. Her presence was calm, authoritative, almost outwardly. "You'll get your answer," she said, "but not here." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I must check something first, and I can't do it empty-handed." She reached into her bag and pulled out a small list, handwritten. "These are the items I need, nothing more and nothing less." The mother blinked, confused and overwhelmed. Min-jae took the list from her hand, scanning it with his usual precision. "We'll get them," he said. Han-rae nodded once. "Meet me at Celia's place," she said quietly. "I will tell you everything there." She looked at them both, Min-jae steady and demanding, the mother trembling and searching. "I promise," she said softly. "I will find her, I'm sure." Then she slipped past them, leaving them in the silence of the conference room, the weight of her words hanging like a countdown that had just begun. The hallway was long and quiet as Min-jae walked beside Celia's mother. The list Han-rae had given him he held firmly in his hand. His steps were steady, his breath measured. He was already in problem-solving mode, already planning how to obtain each item. But something still bothered him. He looked over at her. How do you know, Han-rae?" he asked. He let out a breath that was half a sigh, half a laugh, but without humor. "Believe me," she said softly, "that's a very long story." She squeezed her purse strap, eyes drifting towards the floor as they walked. But for now, she said, let's just get what she asked for. I have a feeling she'll explain it better than I ever could. Minjay stopped in the elevator, scanning the list again. He frowned. These are herbs, he said. Just herbs. How is this supposed to help us find Celia? The mother shook her head slowly, her expression wary but decisive. Let's just trust her, she said. Please. She reached out and gently squeezed his forearm, grounding him. I know my daughter, she said, and something tells me Hanrei knows her in ways that I don't. Minjay met her eyes and finally nodded. All right, he said. Let's go. Together they stepped off of the elevator, the door sliding shut on their unspoken fear. Later that evening, there was a soft knock at Celia's apartment door. Not hurried, not nervous, measured, deliberate, almost ceremonial. When Hanrei stepped inside, she was unexpectedly touched by the worry in their eyes, especially Minjay's. On the surface, he was calm, composed as always. But to her, he looked different, his energy restless, pulled tight and fraying at the edges. It almost made her curious what he was really actually feeling beneath all this control he held. Celia's mother handed over the bag of herbs. Minjay didn't waste time. Okay, he said, eyes flicking between Hanrei and the list of herbs on his mind. So how is this going to get us any closer to Celia, he said. Hanrei let out a quiet chuckle, more breath than sound, as she realized just how far he'd come without knowing anything at all. Celia's fine, she said. So please, sit. They did, Minjay on the edge of his chair, Celia's mother folding her hands tightly in her lap. Hanrei sat opposite of them and began. Celia has cast a spell, she said, voice even. And she has left this realm, and she is on a mission to save her father from certain death. Minjay's eyes widened. Celia's mother leaned forward. Save her father, or why? Because she's empty, Hanrei answered. The emptiness has nothing to do with you. But it drains her so much that she can't even focus on her work, her daily life. She was completely distracted. Me firing her, honestly, it really put her out of her misery. Hanrei gave a small shrug. Her eyes flicked toward Minjay. Then he cut in. Okay, what is this really about? I'm starting to get nervous here, he said. Celia's mother finally found her voice. This woman is this person, she said, staring at Hanrei. Anyways, I many years ago asked her to save my daughter from the emptiness. And she has tricked me. Her voice shook. Tricked? Hanrei scoffed lightly. I don't see it that way at all. Now, I must admit, this is a bit extreme, yes. I mean, her traveling back in time. Traveling back in time, Minjay interrupted. Okay, I've heard enough. He started to rise, but Hanrei lifted her hand, palm out, and the command in the gesture made him stop. Sit, she said quietly. The herbs you brought me will allow me to look and see. Would you like me to? Do whatever you have to do just to find Celia, please, Celia's mother said. And quickly, Minjay added. This is heading into uncharted territory, to say the least, he said. Hanrei began unbinding the herbs, laying them out with precise care. She dimmed the lights, then struck a match and lit the candle on the table. They watched, wary but silent. When the flame flared and settled into a deep, unnatural red, both of them stiffened. Hanrei closed her eyes and let herself fall inward, breathing slow, her fingers lightly grazing the herbs as if they were threads she could follow. The room grew very small, very still. When she finally came out of the trance, she exhaled sharply and opened her eyes. "Celia's safe," she said. "However, she is weak. Very weak. She's fading. Your husband, Thomas," she looked at Celia's mother, "will meet his fate soon. And in that same fate, Celia will fade from that time as well, and die. If she doesn't return by the next full moon, if she doesn't come back by then, she will never return. Not alive, anyway." The mother's hand flew to her mouth. Binge stared, his logical mind already pushing against every word, searching for a loophole, an explanation that made sense. "She's with," Henri began, then she stopped herself. She hesitated, weighing how much to reveal, watching Binge's face as he reasoned, wrestled with the impossible. As she sat with the dim light, Henri went quiet. For a moment she let the silence stretch and simply looked at Binge and felt his gaze on her in return. She couldn't quite understand what kept him rooted there. Why did he stay? He was just a manager, just her liaison. He could have just wished Celia well and moved on with his life, but he hadn't. Now his care radiated off of him like heat, steady, stubborn, refusing to leave the room. The silence broke when Celia's mother spoke. "Okay, so how can we fix this?" she said, her voice thinned but determined. Henri lifted her eyes to her. "That depends on what you mean by fix," she replied. "I just want her to live. Can we at least do that?" her mother said. Henri took a breath. "From this end, we can't do much," she said. "But there is something." "What?" Binge scoffed lightly, the skepticism slipping through. "I am certain that she'll come back through the door," Henri said. "And if everything is going well on that side, it will be a soft entry. We can seal the door from our end so that she can't return to this side. If things are going as well as I think they should be, the goal will be to keep her there." She folded her hands. "We can help contain the energy by closing the door, so it only has one route for her to exit." "Will I ever see her again?" her mother asked, her voice breaking. "If everything goes as well as I believe," Henri answered, "it will be more than you could ever possibly have asked for." Binge stood. "So that's it," he said quietly. Henri rose too. "We will need you as well, Binge." "It doesn't seem so," he replied, the distance already in his tone. He turned toward the door and walked out, the door closing behind him with a soft final click. "Do we really need him?" Celia's mother asked. "Not really," Henri said. "But he'll be back. He's processing." "What does it matter?" Celia's mother whispered. Henri looked toward the door that he had just walked through. "It matters," she said, "because he's her twin." "Who? Him?" The mother's head snapped toward the door. "He's old." "His body is old," Henri said softly, "but his heart is hers." Meanwhile, in 1995, Celia and Binge stayed crouched low in the back seat of his car, the hum of the streetlights buzzing faintly above them. The windows were cracked, just enough for air, but not enough to be seen. They watched the sidewalk with quiet intensity, waiting for her father to walk his regular route home after work. Celia's fingers tapped anxiously against her knee. "It's been since last week," she whispered, "that I saw that man tailing my father." Her jaw tightened. "That man has some nerve, thinking he can just harass him like that. It disgusts me." Binge glanced at her, reading the panic that she tried to mask. "Do you think he'll really try to kill him?" Binge asked, voice soft, trembling in the dark. Honestly, Minjay, I'm terrified. Time is going by so quickly. He wanted to reassure her, but he could only place his hand steady over hers. Quiet strength, the only promise he could offer her. Celia kept her eyes on the street, whispering to herself more than to him. He's so brave, just continuing his week as if nothing is bothering him, following him, really, as if the weight isn't just crushing him. She swallowed, emotion swelling. The joy I felt when I saw him at that ceremony, it was overwhelming, refreshing, like something had come back to life inside of me. Her voice faltered. But now, as the days draw closer, my heart aches. And, me... A sharp pain cut through her sentence. She gasped and pressed her palm to her forehead. Celia? Minjay's heart dropped. He leaned forward instinctively. What is it? Nothing, she whispered, blinking hard. Just my head. I feel a spell of dizziness. Yeah. But I'm fine now. Chinchayo? Really? His voice was low, unconvinced. She nodded, forcing a breath. Silence settled again until she had inhaled, lips curling into a soft, aching smile. Then her father walked by, right on schedule, unaware of the two hidden eyes watching him from the shadows. He passed by the car with his usual confident stride, groceries in his hand, shoulders unconcerned by danger. Celia's smile lingered, fragile and full of longing, as though seeing him alive in that moment was the only thing holding her together. She exhaled, then reached into the bag of seaweed chips that sat between them, without even looking at him, and pressed a seaweed chip into Minjay's hand. For your nerves, she whispered. He rolled his eyes, but he took it anyway. The next morning was the day of the office party. Minjay awoke in his bed the usual way, the sharp buzz of the 6:30 a.m. alarm cutting through the morning quiet. But before he could even reach out to silence it, a small smile had already formed across his face. It eased across slowly, naturally, like it belonged there. He didn't smile much anymore, not like this, but today was different. He had that mandatory company banquet to attend. Even though he had technically been off for the week, he decided that he might as well go in early, drop off some work, check the terrain, see what had been changed since his absence. He knew at some point he had to pull himself back into some kind of normal routine, but he wasn't rushing it. Not today. There was only 4 days left. 4 days until everything he had learned, everything he had witnessed, everything he had feared, collided with the unknown. But he refused to think about that. Not today. Not right now. Tonight, he would see Celia dressed in that beautiful black dress. That's all he wanted to think about. At the office, he moved like a well-oiled machine, clean, efficient, focused, an expert in his field. But today it was more than just the expertise. Everyone felt the difference in him the moment he walked in. More control, more command, more confidence. As if he had quietly stepped into a version of himself that no one had ever seen before. At lunch, he sat with a group of coworkers, and to everyone's surprise, he talked, non-stop, engaged, present, almost light. They watched him like he was someone new. By the time the afternoon came, he had completed every file, signed every document, and organized every task that had been sitting on hold. His manager said nothing, partly because he had no critique, and partly because Minjay was suddenly 3 steps ahead of everyone in the building. As Minjay slung his bag over his shoulder and headed out towards the doors, one of his colleagues called out, "Hey, I heard you had a +1 coming tonight. Yeah?" He turned, offered a polite, almost shy smile. "Nah," he said, "just a friend." He walked out, still floating. But everyone in the room exchanged a look. They all knew better. Meanwhile, Henry called early, just after 7 a.m. Celia's mother answered, voice tired but polite. Chona Chimineo, Henry. Good morning, Chona Chimineo, Henry said warmly. May I speak to Celia? The phone rustled as she passed it over. Hello, Celia muttered, her voice thick with sleep. Good morning, Henry repeated. How are you feeling today? Exhausted, Celia murmured, rubbing her forehead. I was just... Her father stepped into the room at that moment. He leaned down, kissed both of them, his wife's temple and then Celia's cheek, his usual gentle ritual that he adopted in the recent days before heading out the door. Have a good day, he whispered, waving as he left. Celia set the phone down for a few seconds so she could wave back, and that was the moment that Henry felt it, a sudden drop, like the floor giving way beneath her. Her breath hit sharply. Without thinking, she ended the call. On the other end, Celia picked the phone back up and blinked when she realized that Henry was no longer there. Really? She scoffed. She wakes me up at 7 a.m. just to hang up. What is she, some human alarm clock? She tried to lay back down, but something inside her buzzed too loudly to return to sleep. Across town, Henry sat rigid at her work desk, staring at nothing for a brief, long moment. The drop that she felt lingered like cold static in her chest. She pulled closer the notes that she had mapped out over the desk that she had been working on for days, tracing the lines and coordinates. She needed to find that time herb. She only had one chance, one path. Her hand tightened around her pen. I have to get this right, she said, and she began calculating again, determined not to fail. Back at Binge's place, he stood in front of the mirror dressed in his tuxedo. Well, half-dressed. He hadn't cared about attending these company events in years. Another day at work, if you asked him, even when you were supposed to be off work. It was all the same to him, but not tonight. Tonight he was grinning like a kid at a candy store. He had tied his tie 5 times. 5. Every time he messed up, he stopped, shook his head, and tried again. On the 5th attempt, he actually got it right. He actually laughed out loud to himself. He styled his hair, checked himself twice, then he grabbed his keys and made his way out the door, still smiling. Meanwhile, back at Celia's parents' home, her mother was grinning from ear to ear. Then she said, Did you date much in your time? She asked, leaning against the counter as Celia touched up her makeup. No, Mother. Too busy. Celia said it with a shrug. What? Her mother gasped. Oh, no, you're so beautiful. Binge is crazy about you. You know that, right? He's just a nice man, Celia said softly. He is not. Her mother replied immediately, shaking her head. There's nice, and then there's crazy. And he's definitely crazy about you. Celia laughed out loud, covering her face. Oh, this is so fun. Her mother laughed too, but her breath caught when halfway through. She held it, blinking fast, trying to compose herself when she looked at her daughter, older now, but still her child, still in her heart. Celia noticed instantly. She crossed the room in 2 steps and wrapped her arms around her mother, pulling her in tight. We still have fun, Ma, she whispered. Even though it was just the 2 of us, we still had fun. Her mother nodded against her shoulder, eyes closed as she hugged her back. But yes, Celia added with a smile. This is fun too. She kissed her mother on the cheek, and then a knock at the door. Binge. When her father opened the door and Binge stepped inside, the room erupted into laughter. Celia and her mother both doubled over, and even Thomas, standing nearest to Binge, had to put his hand on the wall to steady himself. Binge stood completely still, like a statue. He barely blinked. He tried everything in his power to maintain his cool, composed demeanor, but once the laughter filled the room, he buckled. He turned his head away to hide his smile breaking across his face, but it was too late. He knew he'd been caught. Thomas, still chuckling, tapped Binge's shoulder. It's okay. She is very beautiful. Nay, yes she is, Minjay admitted quietly. Thomas, eager to redirect the spotlight away from Minjay's softening composure, waved his hands. You two go now. You two have fun, he said quickly. Celia and Minjay, smiling, waved goodbye as they stepped out into the evening light. When they arrived at the hotel and stepped inside, Minjay guided her with a gentle, attentive ease. He took everything in, every sound, every shift of light, every soft detail around him. Every moment with her, he etched it carefully into his mind. The feeling of her hand brushing his sleeve, the quiet hum of the lobby, the shimmer of her black dress as she walked beside him. He took a mental note of all of it as the evening barreled on. Later that night, after dinner, Minjay walked her toward the balcony lounge, a quiet space set apart from the noise of the banquet. Floor-to-ceiling glass revealed the entire skyline of Seoul spread beneath them, lights glittering like scattered stars. He stood beside her, hand resting lightly on the railing, letting the chill of the metal ground him. Celia stood only inches away, the soft glow of the city painting her skin a warm amber. How do you do it, he said quietly, almost to himself. She didn't take her eyes off the skyline. Then she answered, Do what? Keep from looking nervous, he said softly, with all those eyes on you. The corner of her mouth lifted. Honestly, I just tell myself the truth. They're not looking at me. They're looking at you. She finally turned to him. And they're trying to figure out if you're crazy. He laughed through his nose, shaking his head. You really think so? Yes, she said, leaning back against the glass. You've done some crazy things this weekend, Minjay. Anyone else would have abandoned ship by now. He shifted closer, the warm lighting catching the edges of his profile. Maybe, he said, I'm a duo. But I had every intention of seeing you. Ever since I saw you standing on that bus stop. Ever since I saw you in that coffee shop. I wanted to know what you were about, he said. She lifted her chin slightly, enough to show she remembered it too. Oh, really? And now that you know that I'm a black woman from the U.S. who traveled through time and who practices magic, she teased. He laughed, but there was sincerity beneath it. A strange combination. But I think I passed the test when that candle blew out on its own and relit. Her eyes softened at the memory. There was a silence, not awkward, but charged. Are you afraid of me? She asked, voice quieter now, more vulnerable. He looked at her fully. The music from the inside drifted faintly through the open doorway. The city hummed below them. The cool breeze slipped between them, brushing her hair across her shoulder. And Minjay realized, with an ache that he hadn't expected, that the moment could slip away if he didn't speak. No, he said. I'm not afraid of you. He took one more step closer, closing the remaining distance. I think, his voice caught. He swallowed, eyes searching hers, as if asking for permission to continue. Her breath trembled, the lights of the city reflected in her eyes, tiny fractured stars. He tried again. I think what I wanted to say was that I think I love you. The words didn't hit her gently. They landed like a weight that she wasn't prepared for. Her lips parted, her breath stilled, every motion. It was suppressing her chest. All weak flickered across her face. Fear, wonder, longing, confusion, tenderness. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She just felt it. Minjay stepped closer, slow, intentional, as if afraid that he would scare her away. His hand brushed the side of her arm. The warmth made her inhale sharply. He leaned in, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Her heartbeat pulsed visibly at her throat. As she tipped her face slightly toward him, her eyes rose to meet his. Her lips parted in a tiny breath. Her lashes trembled as she stood frozen, not out of fear, but because the moment felt too big, too fragile, too real. He tilted his head, ready to close the last inch. "Binge!" His manager's voice cracked across the balcony like a drop of glass. Binge's jaw tightened. His eyes closed in disbelief. Under his breath, he said, "What in the world?" He stepped back slowly, an embarrassed smile tugging at his mouth. As he cleared his throat, he tried to gather himself. And the moment that had almost happened passed. Binge excused himself quickly and quietly, offering a polite apology as he made his way across the room to his boss. The interruption was brief, professional, unavoidable. When he returned, Celia was still standing where he had left her, her expression unreadable, but warm. They left the banquet not long after. Later that evening, they decided to stop by her parents' house to grab a sweater before continuing the date. The night air had cooled now, the city quieter than it had been earlier. Celia chuckled softly in the passenger seat as Binge drove. "What?" he asked, glancing at her. "I was just thinking about your face." Right before we were... He shook his head. "I don't want to hear it." She laughed, the sound light, almost carefree. As they drove down a familiar street, Celia's smile faded. "There. Now look at that," she said suddenly. "That's my father. What is he doing?" They slowed as they passed him on the sidewalk, bags in his hand. He looked fine, normal, too normal. Celia frowned. He shouldn't be out this late. He's being reckless. Binge eased the car to the side of the road. "Do you want me to check on him?" She hesitated. Then she shook her head. "No, it's not today. It's not today. It's fine. Let's just keep going." She waved, and he waved them forward. They arrived at the house. She turned and spoke. "I'll be quick," she said. She ran inside the house to grab the sweater from the chair. But then her mother entered, and she began to tell her mother that she had seen her father walking down the street with the bags. "I don't like it," Celia said. "It feels off." Rosalie's expression tightened. I don't like it either. All of a sudden, I just got this bad feeling. Just go back and get him and bring him home, please." They didn't waste time. By the time they pulled onto the street, they spotted Thomas again, further down the road now. And then they saw the van. It slowed as it approached him. Celia's stomach dropped. The doors opened. Men stepped out. "Binge," she whispered. Thomas turned. Binge hit the accelerator. But before he could reach him, before he could even open the door, one of the men lunged. Thomas reached out to grab something, to dodge. Then he slipped. Time fractured. He stumbled backward, lost his footing, and fell down the embankment, crashing through the bushes and the low trees, disappearing into the darkness below. Everything unfolding at the speed of light. The men froze for half a second. Then they ran. Binge slammed on the brakes. Celia was already out of the car. "Dad!" she screamed. She ran to the edge of the hill, peering down, but it was too dark to see anything. Her breath became fast and shallow. "Binge!" she cried. He ran back to the car and grabbed a flashlight. And just as he turned to turn it on to move toward her, "Celia, no, wait!" She tried to enter to descend the slope, but her legs gave out beneath her. She dropped to her knees. And then she flickered. Her body turned translucent, smoke thin, and then snapped back into solidity just as fast. Binge saw it instantly. He knew what it meant. "Celia!" She collapsed forward as consciousness left her body. He caught her just in time, pulling her into his arms as her body went limp. At the end of the block, Rosalie stood frozen. Then she ran. She didn't need to see him. She already knew. The inevitable had happened. The moment blurred. All Binge could see was shadows, people moving without faces. Voices without shape. Rosalie screamed. It wasn't a cry, it was broken, animal, the kind of sound that comes from somewhere too deep to reach. Doors opened up and down the block. Neighbors poured into the street. Lights flickered on. Someone shouted for help. Then the sirens came. First one, then many, until the streets swarmed with law enforcement and medical responders. They worked fast, too fast. They lifted Celia's body carefully, calling her name, loading her into the ambulance. The door slammed shut and the vehicle pulled away. Lights flashing red against the houses as it disappeared down the street. Min-jae stood frozen. He couldn't feel anything. He couldn't cry. He couldn't move. He couldn't speak. His body was there, but he wasn't inside it. Then he looked up, through glossy, glassy eyes, unfocused eyes. He saw Han-Ray standing at the edge of the room. Rosalie saw her at the same moment. Both of them stood instinctively, as if pulled upright by her presence alone. Before either of them could speak, Han-Ray rushed past them. She closed the hospital room door firmly behind her and pulled the blind shut, sealing Celia inside the room. Minutes passed. It felt like hours. When the door finally opened, Han-Ray stepped out, her face grave, but controlled. "She's with us," she said. "But we don't have much time." Rosalie staggered forward. What happened?" she asked. "I thought—" Han-Ray cut her off gently but firmly. "Before you ask," she said, "understand this. The spirit doesn't have a watch. Time can never be exact." She looked at them both. "But we do have some. Not much, but some." Rosalie pressed her hand to her mouth, tears spilling freely now. "Celia is dire," Han-Ray continued. "But we must pull ourselves together for Thomas's sake and finish what we started." Her voice hardened slightly, not unkind, but unyielding. "Unfortunately, there's no time to shed any tears right now. Celia only has days. The week I was hoping for is no longer an option." Min-jae's chest tightened. "But," Han-Ray said, and that single word cut through the air, "I've located the time herb." They both looked at her. "Stay with her tonight," Han-Ray instructed. "And tomorrow, do not leave her side." She turned toward Min-jae and back to Rosalie. "Both of you, be at my shop tomorrow. We must prepare." Her voice dropped, sharp with urgency. "Now, I must go and tend to something quickly." She didn't wait for a response. The room fell silent again, except for the sound of Celia's shallow breathing behind the closed door. And for the first time since the ambulance left, Min-jae felt something break inside of him. After Han-Ray hurried down the hall, Rosalie and Min-jae watched as she disappeared out of sight. This was the fastest either of them had ever seen her move. Han-Ray usually traveled at her own pace, slow and deliberate, as if time bent around her instead of the other way around. But this was urgency, and Min-jae found himself wondering what could possibly drive someone so frail-looking with that kind of force. What was she going after? The thought vanished the moment Rosalie cracked open the door to Celia's hospital room. They stepped inside together. The sound hit him first, the steady beeping, the hum of the machines, the soft rustle of wires and the tubing, the smell of antiseptic, the sight of her so still beneath the thin sheets. Both of them thought of the same name at the same time. Thomas. Rosalie gently motioned for Min-jae to step closer, and he did. He reached for Celia's hand and held it carefully, as if afraid that she might disappear beneath his fingers. Rosalie watched him for a moment, and then looked toward the door. "I need to catch Han-Ray," she said quietly. "Before she gets to that train, I need to ask her something." She squeezed Min-jae's shoulder. "I'll be right back," she reassured him. And then she was gone. Min-jae sat alone beside Celia's bedside, the numbness finally washing over him. Questions flooded in relentless. Was she really brought into his life just to awaken him, only to leave? Was she dying, or just being pulled back into another time? Should he let her go? Could any of this actually work? Could they really be together? Could he go with her? The question spiraled until he could no longer control them anymore. Celia, he whispered. Nothing. Yo gesso. I'm here, he said softly. We promised each other that we would try for each other, he said. That's what I'm doing. He swallowed hard. You said you would do that too, right? His eyes drifted toward the candle Henry had placed at her bedside. The flame was barely there, a thin silver ray of light, struggling to stay alive. Binge closed his eyes and pressed Celia's hand gently against his forehead. Celia, I love you, he said. His voice cracked. You never answered me. He tightened his grip, desperate now. Please come back to me. Or at least tell me you don't love me, so I can come up with a plan to try to change your mind. A breath, please. The flame dimmed further. His breath caught. A tear slipped free and landed on her hand as he squeezed it. Then, before his very eyes, the flame surged, bright, bold, alive. And just as quickly as it did so, it settled itself again. Binge looked up. Celia's lashes fluttered. Her eyes opened. How? She whispered weakly. Binge laughed and cried at the same time. Henri. It was Henri, he answered.
Episode 6, The Crossroads, the finale.
Henri and Rosalie were inside Celia's apartment. They had been awake all night. The air was heavy and steady, papers spread across the floor, diagrams sketched and redrawn, candles burned down to their bases. It had been a full day since they uncovered the harm that Celia was in, and there was no longer room for grief. This was work now. The full moon was coming. Henri stood near the window, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the sky. I know if Thomas has passed, she said calmly. Celia doesn't have much time. Rosalie looked up from the papers on the floor. So what do we do? We cast a time spell, Henri replied. And by all accounts, it's the most complex one there is. She turned back toward the diagrams. Time is the most powerful force of energy, she continued. It only moves forward. That's why trying to save someone or bring someone back from death is almost impossible. She picked up a pencil and began drawing a wave. Time doesn't bend, she said. It flows like water, always forward. And when it moves, it crushes whatever's in its path. She drew small blocks beneath the wave. These are events, buildings, if you will. Events that are fixed in a certain location or time. When something happens, when Thomas dies, that building that's already in place is removed. Rosalie leaned closer. What you're trying to do at this point, Henri said, is reverse the wave. Rebuild the structure exactly as it would have been before it collapsed. She paused. That takes force. She drew another line, this one sliding backward over the wave. In Celia's case, time never reversed. It kept moving forward. Her energy simply slid backward over it. Rosalie frowned. How? Thomas, Henri said simply. His energy was the rope, the anchor she held onto while she slid. She tapped a diagram. When her energy settled in 1995, she became a fixture there, a building, if you will, anchored by Thomas. Rosalie followed the lines with her eyes. But the energy was unrooted by magic, Henri continued. So the building in 2025 never moved, only the energy did. She straightened. And energy always tries to return to its source. Silence filled the room. So she's being pulled back, Rosalie said slowly. Yes. So when? When is this going to happen? It will happen when the wave reaches her, which it would have been at the time of Thomas's death. However, my presence on the other side has anchored her, but it's unstable. But it will give us the time to organize. Rosalie swallowed. So what does that mean for us? Henri didn't hesitate. When she returns, and she will, we must allow her connection to rejoin with the origin of her time. And then we must slam the door shut before her energy breaks the threshold. Rosalie stared at her. I don't understand. Henri exhaled once. Basically, she's coming back through the door. We will have to slow her down. Her energy will reconnect, but we only have seconds. So, we will force the veil, or the door, closed, and time's own momentum of force will push her back. She paused. And on the other side, they must soften the blow and pray. Rosalie sat back, overwhelmed. I'm still lost, she admitted. And how will I be able to see her again? Henri reached into her pocket and removed the locket. This, she said. This is how. Rosalie took it carefully. What is this? This is the locket your husband wore when he passed, Henri said. The same one I gave to Binge. Rosalie's breath caught. It contains essence, Henri continued. Binge's, Thomas's, and now it will absorb yours. She placed it in Rosalie's palm. Wear this until the day of the spell casting. Rosalie looked up. And Binge? He will wear it when he returns. Rosalie's voice shook. Are you sure he's going to come back? Henri nodded. He's already on his way back. She gestured to the table. When Celia arrives, we'll have past and present energies combined. The locket will allow her to absorb them and take them with her. Rosalie frowned. Take them where? Where they belong, 1995, Henri said. Enough energy to shift memories, to weave past events into the future without breaking her. Rosalie exhaled slowly. This sounds like too much. Henri finally met her eyes. I've waited many years for this challenge, she said quietly. I will not fail. She looked back at the diagrams. I've considered everything, she said, and I believe it will work. Yes, but you're missing one key detail, Rosalie said quietly. Thomas didn't die. He was just missing. He was just never found. Henri looked up at the irony of Rosalie's words lingering in the silence between them. I see, Henri replied. Meanwhile, in 1995, Rosalie hurried down the hall and nearly stopped short when she saw Henri standing in the lobby. She rushed to her. Oh, Rosalie said, catching her breath. I thought you'd be almost to the train by now. What happened? I needed to retrieve something first, Henri replied. Rosalie frowned. What is it? She hesitated and asked quietly. Please, tell me. Do we have enough time? Henri turned to her fully. Her expression was sincere, steady, unguarded. This is difficult, she said. It's complex, and nothing in life is ever guaranteed. Rosalie's hands clenched together. But, Henri continued, I believe it will work. Our odds are extremely high. Rosalie searched her face. Consider this, Henri said gently. I was able to even bring your daughter here safely here in the first place. I would have never done that if I truly did not believe it was possible. If I didn't believe it should be possible. She paused. This isn't just about spells or magic, she went on. What keeps us in favor is something older than that. Rosalie's breath slowed. These two were always meant to be together, Henri said. I'm not forcing something that doesn't belong. She met Rosalie's eyes. Sometimes people lose their way. Sometimes lives drift off course and become stuck. I'm not changing their path. She shook her head lightly. I'm only placing them back on the track she was always meant to be on. Nothing more, Rosalie swallowed. And that track, Henri said. Her voice became calm and certain. Leads to happiness for all of you. Rosalie hesitated. Well, what can I do? She asked. Nothing, Henri said simply. Then she turned and started for the exit. Henri, Rosalie called to her. Please, don't leave me in the dark this time. I would never forgive myself if something happens to Celia, too. Henri stopped. She turned back slowly, as if considering the cost of what she was about to say. Reaching into her coat, she pulled out the locket. Rosalie frowned. What's that? This, Henri said, is the locket Thomas wore. Rosalie's breath caught. I need to send it to myself in 2025. Rosalie stared at her. How? Henri's expression sharpened. Not unkind, but unmistakably firm. Just know this, she said. I am older than you may realize, and you are not dealing with someone who practices for hobbies or curiosity. Rosalie's eyes widened. I am still operating in 2025, Henri continued, to protect your daughter there as well. Rosalie's voice dropped to a whisper. Are you human? Henri studied her for a long moment. That, she said softly, is a long story. The answer is yes and no. She closed Rosalie's fingers gently around the locket. We'll have time for that conversation soon, she added. But right now, I need to get this across the mail before midnight. Rosalie swallowed. What do I do? Stay with Celia tonight, Henri said. I need both lockets present with her. They'll give her strength. She stepped back. Leave this to me. This is easy compared to what you'll have to do in the coming days. Her gaze held Rosalie's. I need you sharp. Henri squeezed her shoulder once and turned and hurried away. Rosalie watched until Henri faded into the distance. Then she turned and went back to Celia's room. As she entered, something in her chest loosened. Binge was seated beside her bed, hovering anxiously. Celia's eyes were open. At last, a brief opportunity to breathe for a moment. Morning rushed in quietly. Binge remained seated beside Celia's bedside, unmoving, while Rosalie tried without success to sleep in the chair near the window. The candle burned steadily between them, its flame unwavering. When the doctor arrived, his assessment was brief. Exhaustion, he said. She needs rest, nothing more. Relief passed through the room like a breath held, finally released. And then they returned to Henri's shop before midday. Celia was laid gently in the bed in the back room. Her mother relit the candle and placed it carefully at her bedside, the same way it had been placed the night before. Then Rosalie and Binge went downstairs. Henri was already waiting in the back office. When Binge and Rosalie entered, they stopped short. Diagrams covered the tables and walls, carefully drawn, revised, layered, bundles of herbs sorted and labeled with meticulous precision. Nothing looked rushed. Nothing looked improvised. Binge took it all in slowly. Whatever Henri was doing, she had been preparing for it long before Celia collapsed. The realization settled something in him. Henri began without pleasantries, not out of coldness, but focus. As you can see, she said, all the herbs required for the anchoring ceremony are already here, except one. She looked up. The thyme herb. She let that sit. Then she continued. But before that, there were 3 conditions that must have been met. And we still have some outstanding. She raised one finger. First, Thomas's blessing. She glanced at Rosalie. That's already been completed. Rosalie nodded. Henri raised a second finger. Secondly, Binge and Celia must accept a vow of love spoken out loud. Minjay sifted. I did, he said. I told her, but she didn't have time to respond. Hanrei nodded calmly, as if she had expected it. That's all right, she said. The response is already forming. It's strong. Minjay frowned slightly, listening. She hasn't spoken it yet because she believes that she pulled you into this against your will, Hanrei explained. That guilt is what's holding it back. But she will speak it. She met his eyes. For now, just stay close to her. Minjay nodded. That made sense to him. Then Hanrei raised the third finger. Third, your mother must speak her blessing. Minjay looked up at her sharply. My mother? Yes. How is that possible? Hanrei didn't dismiss the question. Well, she's already here, she said. She's been waiting. She only needs a way to reach you. Minjay's voice lowered. Her grave? Hanrei nodded. Yes. Will you go? He hesitated. Nay. I will. Hanrei handed him a satchel of herbs and a small candle. The locket you're wearing already holds some of Celia's essence, she explained. Take this candle, light it, place it there. Allow your mother to do her part. Minjay absorbed that in the silence. Rosalie spoke up, her voice careful. You said today was supposed to be the day Thomas passed. Yes, Hanrei said. But he didn't? Rosalie pressed. Why would the timeline change? Hanrei paused, choosing her words. Sometimes spirit intervenes, she said. Sometimes the burden of knowing what's coming does more harm than the event itself. Rosalie swallowed. It may have been Thomas's wish, Hanrei continued, or simply an act of mercy. Either way, I believe the timeline adjusted to spare him. Minjay listened, but he said nothing. Hanrei leaned forward, resting her hands on the table. There are 3 things that will help hold Celia as she's being dragged back through time, she said. Minjay focused immediately. First, Hanrei said, the herbs. They stabilize her energy long enough to keep her from tearing through the threshold. She gestured to the bundles that laid out carefully in front of her. Second, the anchor that's already attached to you, Minjay. It's holding, but only partially. It isn't strong enough on its own. Minjay nodded. That tracked. So, we add a third, she continued, opening a small box and revealing the small dark sphere. This magnet, she said. Minjay frowned. That's supposed to hold her, he said. It will help, Hanrei said. But honestly, it won't be strong enough against the force of time by itself. She didn't let that linger. That's why there's a 4th factor, she added. Not an object, but a person. Minjay looked up. Your mother. His breath caught. She's the only one who can clearly see Celia's spiritual essence, Hanrei explained. And more importantly, she's the only one that can interact with it. Minjay struggled to keep up. You're saying she can hold her? Nay, Hanrei said. And she will, as long as she can. She let the weight of that settle before continuing. That will slow Celia down long enough for the future Damie and Rosalie to act. Rosalie's name anchored the moment. When Celia reaches the threshold, Hanrei went on, they will transfer the locket to her. Minjay looked down instinctively at the one resting against his chest. That locket contains your future essences, Hanrei said, and Rosalie's. She looked up sharply. Future essences? It's necessary, Hanrei said. Without it, the memories won't carry. The events won't align. She spoke carefully now, teaching. The transfer allows Celia to absorb what has already happened and what will happen so that the future can adjust without breaking her. Min-jae stared at her. There's a future me? He asked slowly. One that knows Celia? Hanrei lifted her hand, not to shut him down, but to pause him. That's a conversation for later, she said. But yes. Min-jae leaned back slightly, disbelief washing over him. And you're connected to her there as well, Hanrei added. He said nothing. He simply sat with it, trying to make sense of the reality that had already moved ahead of him. Hanrei gathered the final papers and set them apart from the rest. This is the one thing left, she said, the time herb. Min-jae straightened. It must be harvested at the 4 corners of Korea, Hanrei continued, north, south, east, and west. She turned to a diagram so they can both see it. 30 degrees in each direction, 30 miles out. Rosalie frowned. Why 30? Hanrei didn't hesitate. Because Celia traveled back 30 years, she said. The frequencies must match. Time responds to symmetry. Min-jae absorbed that silently. It must also be picked exactly at 3 a.m., Hanrei added. That hour aligns with the final frequency. Every variable must echo the same number. Rosalie exhaled slowly. So all of it is 30. Yes, Hanrei said. Years, direction, distance, and time. Min-jae nodded. The logic was precise, so that helped. Hanrei's expression slightly shifted. But this is where it becomes difficult. Min-jae looked up. Magic depends on belief, she said carefully. Not effort, not intention. Alignment. She met his eyes. And you don't believe in magic. He didn't argue. No, She stopped him. If there's even a fraction of doubt when the herb is cut, Hanrei continued, it won't activate. It becomes inert. Rosalie stiffened. So maybe someone else should do it. That would be safer, Hanrei agreed. Another practitioner. No, Min-jae said immediately. I can do it. Hanrei studied him. Min-jae, she said, you're forgetting something. She tapped the diagram once. I can feel your energy, she said quietly, all the way in 2025. Min-jae froze. And I don't know, she continued. Even the future you has to align as well and believe as strongly as you do right now. You are one energy, past and future, together, not separate. The weight of that settled heavily. One mistake, Hanrei said. One moment of doubt at 3 a.m., and everything collapses. Min-jae leaned back, defeated for a moment. Then he looked up. You said you could send something to that time, he said slowly. Hanrei's eyes narrowed slightly. Yes. Then I'll give you something to send to me, he said. Something that will help. Hanrei didn't answer immediately. If it doesn't work, Min-jae added, then find someone else. But we only have 3 days. He looked at her directly. Please, trust me. She felt it before he even finished speaking. You say that you can feel energy, he went on. And you say that we're connected there too, he swallowed. Can you feel that I want to help her? Hanrei held his gaze. Yes, she said. But old energy patterns are hard to retrain. And we only have 3 days. Yes, we only have 3 days, Rosalie echoed. Min-jae nodded. I know. Silent stretch. Hanrei looked at him. Truly looked. Rosalie nodded once, silently. All right, Hanrei said at last. What do you want to send? I have to do it tonight, Min-jae said. Yes, by tonight, Hanrei insisted. Hanrei lifted the small box. And it has to fit in here. But Min-jae was already out the door. Later that night, the clock crept toward the hour. Hanrei stood alone in the backyard, The night still and expectant, she waited patiently as if time had agreed to pause. Footsteps approached. Minjay appeared through the gate. Henry glanced up briefly and noticed Celia and Rosalie watching from the window above, their faces pressed close to the glass. Minjay stopped beside her and held out what he had brought, a single piece of paper. It was worn and soft at the edges. Henry took it carefully. When she unfolded it, she smiled. It was a child's drawing, Minjay, drawn small and earnest, standing beside a princess. The lines were uneven, the figures imperfect, but the intention was unmistakable. Henry studied it for a moment longer than necessary. Then she nodded. She lit the candle, placed the paper inside the small box, and knelt. The ground gave way easily, the soil already loose, as if it had been opened and closed many times before. She set the box inside and covered it without ceremony. Then she stood and walked away. Minjay stared after her. "That's it?" he asked. Henry didn't turn. "Yes." He hesitated. Then he followed. How do you know it worked?" Henry stopped and spun around, pointing sharply toward the window. Minjay lifted his head. Celia and Rosalie were laughing quietly, caught mid-moment. The tension was gone from their shoulders. Minjay nodded to himself. I do believe," he said quickly. "I just wanted to check for security purposes." Henry raised her hand and swiped at him as if she might actually hit him. "Minjay. I mean," he added, backing away, "we leave our keys in the house sometimes without meaning to." Laughter drifted down from the window. Henry shook her head, unable to stop the corner of her mouth from lifting. And for the first time that night, the future felt, just briefly, reachable. Morning came early in 1995. A sharp knock echoed through Celia's apartment. Rosalie opened the door just to see Henry step forward, already moving past her. "I received a message," Henry said. Rosalie blinked. "From who?" "From me," Henry replied, walking straight into the living room. Rosalie turned, confused. "From you?" Henry stopped near the table. "Nonetheless, it's for Minjay." She turned back toward Rosalie. "And it tells me two things." Rosalie waited. "First," Henry said, "Celia's alive." Rosalie's breath caught. "Second," Henry continued, "the plan is still intact even now." She reached into her coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "Younger Minjay sent a message." Rosalie took it carefully and unfolded it. She frowned. What is this, a cartoon?" Henry nodded once. It's the beginning." Rosalie looked closer. "When Minjay was a child, he believed that he would meet his true love. This is how he imagined it," Henry said. She paused. "This drawing isn't sentiment, it's alignment." Rosalie slowly lowered herself onto the chair, the weight of it pressing in. "So you're sure he's involved?" she said quietly. "Yes, he's on board," Henry replied. Rosalie hesitated. "And you think he'll actually come here?" Henry nodded. Yeah. Tomorrow morning, in fact, he will come to my office." Rosalie let out a slow breath. "To argue?" Henry allowed herself the faintest smile. To reason," she corrected. "To question. To threaten to call law enforcement." Rosalie looked up sharply. "And you're ready for that?" Henry met her eyes, completely certain. "I'm 100% ready, and sure that he'll come." Rosalie stared down at the drawing again. "You think he'll really participate in the spell casting?" Henry laughed, not mocking, not amused, confident. "Yes, he will." Rosalie looked unconvinced. "He won't believe in the spell," Rosalie said. Henry nodded calmly. "He won't want to," she agreed. "But the vow he made to Celia many lives ago, that won't allow him to live with the guilt of knowing he could have helped and he didn't." She reached for the paper and folded it again. And that will be enough. Yes, it will be what we need to save Celia. Minjay arrived at our office exactly when she expected him to, like clockwork. Before he could speak, Hanrei spoke first. I know why you're here, she said calmly. You want answers, and the answers you want aren't easily explained. Minjay didn't interrupt. I suppose it really comes down to this, Hanrei continued. Do you believe Celia is worth the investment of help? He frowned slightly. Everyone deserves dignity, he said, and help. She's done nothing but be respectful ever since she arrived here. To dismiss her the way that she has been... He stopped, choosing his words. That's often the worst kind of disrespect, really. Hanrei looked up at him. You're right, she said simply. Minjay paused. He hadn't expected the agreement. Well then, what's required of you is something you struggle with. He waited. Which is, he asked. Belief. Belief without the prejudice of logic. He exhaled. Speak plainly, please. Hanrei reached for the folded piece of paper on her desk. Someone wanted you to have this, she said. They believed you would understand it. Minjay took the piece of paper and unfolded it. His expression changed. He looked up slowly. Otokeo, how did you get this? Hanrei didn't blink. You gave it to me. He stared at her, unreadable. Then, without a word, he turned and headed for the door. If you want to help Celia, Hanrei called after him. He paused, but he didn't turn around. Then come to Celia's apartment at 11:45 the day after tomorrow. 11:45 p.m. Don't be late. Minjay said nothing. He opened the door and closed it gently behind him. Hanrei watched the door for a moment longer. Got you, she said quietly. Later that night, Minjay sat in his apartment staring at the paper in disbelief. Confusion washing over him. Floods of questions. How in the world did she get this? And what in the world does it have to do with Celia? Then, dread. He knew that if he wanted answers, he would have to go back to that apartment. And he wasn't sure if he could bear to hear what the answers were, and what they would mean for him. It was the third day now. It came faster than any normal blink, as well as the anxiety that filled the room now. Early morning light had crept into the back room of Hanrei's shop, pale and thin. Celia lay weak against Minjay's leg, her breath shallow. The strain showed on her face now, more than the exhaustion. Something deeper. Minjay felt it before he understood it. A tight aching pull settled in his chest. Not fear exactly, but terror, quiet and relentless, rising where he couldn't reason it away. Rosalie sat frozen in a chair near the window, staring at nothing. Even Hanrei at the opposite window was seated now with her hands folded, her eyes closed, as if listening to something only she could hear. Should we go to the site? Rosalie asked suddenly, breaking the silence. To pick the herb. Not yet, Hanrei said calmly. Stay steady. Remain calm. Rosalie hesitated. What about future Minjay? Has he... Hanrei lifted her hand slightly. He hasn't, she said. Then she paused. Wait. Silence. Rosalie holding her breath. Then Hanrei opened her eyes. Now, he has, Hanrei said. He's decided. He will go. She exhaled slowly. Now, we're all set. Rosalie mirrored her breath, relief washing over her. I guess Minjay knows himself, Hanrei added quietly. I guess the hard part starts now, Rosalie said. Yes, Henri nodded. Execution is definitely the hard part. The sun had set on the third day, and everyone moved busy like a machine returning to life after the news of future Minjay's change of direction. Everything bloomed with possibility. But inside the back room, Minjay stayed like a fixture next to Celia. Minjay held tightly to her hand, squeezing gently every time she winced, his heart fractured with every sound she made. Minjay, she whispered. I'm here, he said immediately. It feels strange, she murmured. I can't feel your energy anymore. I guess I can't access my magic because I'm too weak. He frowned slightly. It feels funny not feeling you. He leaned closer. What's on your mind, Celia? He said. She took a small breath. You're going to see your mother soon? He stilled. Nay. I haven't been to her grave and... He tried to remember. I actually don't know how long it's been, actually. His voice trembled. I keep wondering what I'll see. Will I see her clearly? Will I hear her? Will I know how to talk to her? He swallowed. The idea that something like this could even be possible is... He exhaled. Liberating? I guess that's a way to put it. Celia chuckled softly. No, that's not quite the word I was thinking of either. She shifted slightly. I don't know, I'm just focused on it, I guess. I'm going to take her your picture, the one your mother gave me, from our first date. He laughed quietly to himself. It's funny how something like that could have so much, sentiment, I guess. Minjay, I'm sorry I brought you into this, she said. She squeezed his hand. You didn't, he said. I liked you the first moment when I first heard you pronounce Dr. Ko wrong. He laughed to himself. You really need to practice. Especially if you're going to live here, he added. Then he stopped himself. She squeezed his hand again. Minjay, she said softly. It's not like that. I do love you. He froze. What did you say? She hesitated. I said, I do love you too. She met his eyes. Because from the first moment I met you, you handled me with such care. You never let me feel alone, not even for one moment. Not when I first came to Korea. And the second time as well. She smiled weakly. Thank you for that. But before he could respond, the door creaked open. Come on out, Minjay said, without looking away from her. Henri and Rosalie stepped inside, both smiling from ear to ear. I take it you heard that, Minjay said. Every single word, Henri and Rosalie said together. Oh, Rosalie added. Henri clapped her hands once. All warmth gone, focus snapping back into place. Now, she said, let's get to work. They moved quickly, but carefully. Coats were pulled down from the hooks. Sweaters were folded and unfolded again, as hands checked pockets, satchels, candles. Henri handed out paper instructions, making sure to cover every detail. Nothing was rushed, but nothing was wasted. Celia sat on the edge of the bed, pale and unsteady. Minjay knelt in front of her and helped her guide her arms into a sweater, pausing when he saw that her breath was growing shallow. He waited until she nodded before continuing. When she stood, he kept one hand at her back until she was able to find her balance again. Henri watched them and then she spoke. Listen carefully, she said. Once you leave this place, you do not change direction, and you do not hesitate, and do not improvise. She looked at each of them in turn. Rosalie, you to the north.
You will stop only at the marked point. If the wind shifts, wait. Do not cut until exactly 3. Rosalie nodded, clutching her coat tighter. Min-jae, you to the east, Hanrei continued. You already know what you're listening for. Keep your mind clear. If you feel doubt, you pause until it settles. Precision matters more than speed. Min-jae nodded once. Celia, Hanrei said more gently, you go west. You stay with my assistant the entire time. If your strength drops, you stop. We are starting early enough. The herb will guide you there. Celia swallowed and nodded. Hanrei opened the door. The hallway was quiet, washed in as the early evening faded into night. The night faded into the wee hours of the early morning. They stepped out together. Min-jae stopped first. He turned to Celia and pulled her into a careful embrace, mindful of her weakness. He rested his forehead briefly against hers, then squeezed her hand firmly, grounding, intentional. I'll see you soon, he said. She nodded. I know. Rosalie stepped forward and kissed Celia's forehead, lingering for a moment before pulling back. Hanrei watched them silent. Then they separated. Min-jae turned to the east without looking back. Celia went west, support at her side. Rosalie headed north, her steps steady despite the weight she carried. Hanrei remained for a moment longer, watching until each of them was gone. Then she turned south. 4 paths, 4 directions, 1 moment already in motion. The time was 1 a.m. Min-jae sat behind his wheel, the road empty ahead of him. The night was still and untouched, not hot, not cold. Autumn held his breath in that narrow space before dawn, when the world feels paused but not alert. Leaves lay scattered across the street, browns and muted golds barely visible under the wash of his headlights. The air didn't move. There was no wind to argue with his thoughts. He parked a short distance from the cemetery and cut the engine. The gates were locked. Min-jae didn't hesitate. He slipped through where the fence gave way, just enough for someone who knew the grounds well. The beam of his flashlight cut a narrow path ahead of him, stone markers appearing and disappearing as he moved. The stillness deepened as he walked. He hadn't been here in years, not because he didn't want to come, but because missing his mother was something that he had learned to suppress just to function. Knowing that she might have been here waiting made the ache sharper. He reached for a grave and knelt. The candle was lit carefully, shielding from nothing but habit. He placed the herbs around the stone, the green threading softly cut through the grass and a dim light. It was quietly beautiful. Min-jae sat back on his heels. The night remained calm, and he waited. He watched the flame flicker against the carved letters. Min-jae closed his eyes and tried to imagine her. He waited, but there was nothing. His chest tightened. Was it the urgency? The panic beating against his ribs? He tried to slow his breath, to steady himself. He centered himself. Then, speaking softly in Korean,
엄마, 나 왔어.
Ma, I'm here. His voice trembled.
이렇게 필요할 때만 오면 안 되는 거 알아.
I know I shouldn't only come when I need something. He stopped, swallowing.
보고 싶을 때 왔어야 했는데 그랬으면 아무것도 못했을 거야.
I should have come when I missed you. But if I had, I don't think I could have worked or slept at all, he said. Tears welled despite his effort to stay composed. He straightened his back, forcing himself to breathe. He continued.
엄마, 이걸 정말 원했어?
Ma, did you really want this from me? He said. He looked up, searching the air quietly.
그 사람이 그녀일 줄 알았어?
Did you know it would be her? He said. His voice dropped.
외국인이고 시간 여행이고
A
주문까지.
foreigner, time travel, spells, he said. He let out a small, breathless laugh.
중요해야 하는데 이제 중요하지 않아.
It should matter, and somehow it doesn't, he said.
He pressed his palm to the earth, grounding himself. Then he continued,
어려운 게 너무 많아도 난 이걸 원해.
even with everything that makes this hard, I want this, he said. A pause.
엄마도 그랬으면 좋겠어.
I hope you want this for me too. His voice softened.
사랑해. 항상 사랑했고 앞으로도 그럴
I
거야.
love you, he said. Then quieter still. I always have. I always will, he said. He bowed his head. He waited. Minutes passed, long enough that it felt like hours. The flames steady. The leaves whispered faintly. The air remained calm, but nothing still. Minjae opened his eyes slowly. He didn't rage. He didn't beg again. He simply sat there, letting the disappointment settle. Then, with a quiet resolve, he reached for his flashlight. Even without a sign, he would continue. Minjae finally rose to his feet. He rested his hand against the stone for a moment longer, letting the quiet settle into him. Then he turned and started for the herb, because wanting to need this had already been decided. Rosalie drove north with both hands firm on the steering wheel, the road quiet and nearly empty. Her thoughts raced faster than the car ever could, her heart thumping hard while breaking all at once. This was the moment that Thomas should have been here. The ache surfaced without warning. She tried to push it down, focusing instead on what was and what's to come, her hand moving instinctively to her stomach, remembering the versions of herself, baby Celia turning inside of her, life insisting on continuing, even when everything else felt impossible. That memory studied her. Her daughter would grow. She would become strong. She would become herself. Rosalie let that truth anchor her as the road narrowed and the land opened into stillness. She pulled over at the edge of the marked region and shut off the engine. The silence rushed in, deep and complete. No wind, no movement, just the earth waiting. She took the map from the passenger seat and studied it carefully. North, 30 miles, 30 degrees. She memorized the surroundings, the slope of the land, the way the trees leaned, the open stretch of ground ahead. She wanted this place etched into her mind. There would be no second guessing later. Rosalie stepped out of the car and walked the remaining distance on foot. When she reached the spot, she knelt and set the candle down, unlit for now. She placed the herbs beside her, arranging them carefully, deliberately. Then she sat back on her heels and waited. She didn't call out. She didn't pray. She simply breathed, holding space for what was coming. The North was ready. In the west, Celia studied herself as 1G drove. The road unfurled quietly beneath the headlights. The world narrowed to motion and breath. Music played low in the car. She tried to disappear into it, but the pain, however, refused to be ignored. It ached constantly now, deep, sharp, relentless. It took everything she had to muffle the screams rising in her head. For a moment, regret surfaced. All this pain just to... She cut the thought off. Focus, she told herself. Focus. She focused on her mother, on Minjae. The memory returned unbidden. Minjae's face, when he heard her say, "I do love you." The way he had gone still, as if something small had mattered in a way that changed everything. If that was the last beautiful moment in her life, she thought, it was enough. She had never said "I love you" like that before, not to anyone other than her mother and her father. The weight of it matched the moment she had seen when her father was standing alive for the first time. Both moments bright, both moments surrounded by sadness. She pushed that away. Hanwei's words came back to her, spoken earlier to Minjae. We would have great happiness if we let each other in. Would we? Celia wondered. Was that why she had been so afraid? Not of loss, not of loving again, of not being able to see the light through the darkness. If it was taken from her? She swallowed and breathed. I am loved, she reminded herself. She had been loved every day, before she was even born, her mother planning, arranging, protecting. The memory of her mother placing the herbs into her suitcase rose up now, sharp and clear. She knew, Celia thought. She always knew. A smile tugging weakly at her lips. Minjay coming to her apartment after she had been fired. He hadn't needed to do that. The memory settled warm in her chest. Her father, without question, helping to bring them together. This wasn't forced. It was real. As her thoughts settled, the pressure in her body lifted. Not completely, but enough. The pain eased just a fraction, enough for her to rest her head back against the seat. Celia had closed her eyes and smiled faintly. For the first time in hours, the screaming had quieted. As they neared the spot and pulled up slow, she was able to relax more. The West was ready. Henri drove slowly. She didn't drive much, if at all, really. The car had been hers for many, many years, yet she rarely bothered with it. She felt safer on foot, she always thought. The idea of it made her laugh softly to herself. Safer. What did that even mean? Death, after all, was only a temporary condition. And yet she had avoided it like the plague for many centuries. Her thoughts drifted, as they always did when the road was empty. Her purpose, joining twin flames. It's what she had always done. Every woman born in her line was given a 200-year mission. No more, no less. 2 centuries to guide, to bind, to correct the fractures of love left behind. Henri had passed 300, really. She had outlived her calling by more than a century. Was it punishment or arrogance? If she had passed on naturally, she would have been able to find her true love by now. Song-jae. Her chest tightened at the thought of him. If the order had been obeyed, he would have been reborn already. 100 years after her death, they would have returned to each other, as it was always meant to be, as it was always meant to happen. But she hadn't died. She wondered sometime if that was the reason he hadn't returned yet. If by remaining here, by prolonging her life unnaturally, she had delayed him. If he had been reborn, she would know it. She would feel it. His energy would crash into her like thunder. He had shone too brightly in her heart for her to ever miss him. Or was it because she stayed, she thought, waiting? She pressed the thought down. This wasn't about her. This was about Celia. Henri had never done anything like this before. Each mission was meant to affect only the present. No crossings, no echoes, no folding time back on itself. But she had watched love thin in the world, fade, fracture, become something people were afraid to touch. And somehow along the way, she had decided that every moment was worth trying for, that love, real love, was precious enough to give everything for, even herself, even her life. This certainly wasn't about using 2 living essences to restore her body to what it had been. It was about her calling. She loved witnessing bonds take root, stretching across lifetimes, loved seeing people choose each other and bind their lives together despite the age they had lived in. Especially now, she hoped, quietly without bargaining, that this might be the reason God would spare her life, would spare her love, that she might see him again, Song-jae, feel his love again, before the world had faded completely. Her thoughts broke as the road ended. Henri pulled the car into the place and shut off the engine. The night around her was still, unchallenging. She stepped out and stood for a moment, letting the ground settle beneath her feet. She nodded once to herself. The South was ready. Minjay drove faster than he meant to. Worry, anger, fear. Each one pinched a different nerve, and together they made it hard to breathe. The road stretched dark and empty ahead of him, headlights cutting a narrow tunnel through the night.
He was angry, not just frustrated, angry. He hadn't seen her, not a flicker, no sign, no warmth. Nothing but a cold stone and the mosquitoes whining in the dark. Just tombstones and silence. I did everything right, he thought. The anger surged again, with his foot pressing harder on the gas. He tried to calm himself, tried to breathe it down, but the more he thought, the tighter his chest became. Then, something appeared in the road, dead center. "What the?" he muttered, instinct taking over as he swerved. Too late. The car lurched. A sharp crack echoed through the cabin, followed by an unmistakable thud, thud, thud. The tire blew. Minjae slammed on the brakes and pulled over to the shoulder, the car stuttering to a stop. For a split second, all he could see was red. He got out of the car and kicked the side of it, the sound dull and useless against the metal. "Damn it," he said out loud, the word tearing out of him. He stood there for a moment, chest heavy. The night swallowed the sound. Then he turned sharply and ran for the trunk, yanking it open and digging for the spare, with his hand shaking. He didn't stop. He didn't look back. Whatever this was, bad luck, timing, or something else, he wasn't turning around. He was still going east. The east was almost ready.
Meanwhile, in 2025, Hanrei and Rosalie worked without pause. Candles were checked, repositioned, checked again. Diagrams were adjusted by fractions, not inches. Herbs were laid out, then laid out again, in different order, then returned to the first. Nothing was rushed, but nothing was stopped. Minjae still hadn't confirmed if he would come. Nothing from him at all. Rosalie hovered near the doorway. Her hands fidgeted despite her best efforts. She glanced at the clock, then at Hanrei, then back at the door. Will he come?" she asked, unable to stop herself. Do we really need him?" After a beat, Hanrei didn't look up from her work. "Yes," she said calmly. "We need him to be present." But you said he doesn't have to actually do anything," Rosalie pressed. "That's correct in a way," Hanrei replied. Participation doesn't always require action per se." Rosalie glanced up confused. Then she traced the symbols again, slower this time. The chant had stopped making sense, not in sound, but in meaning. One word kept repeating subtly, easy to miss, but now that she had seen it, she couldn't unsee it. She looked up from the page. Hanrei," she said carefully. This word here." Hanrei didn't turn. Rosalie swallowed. "It means sacrifice, doesn't it?" Hanrei's hand paused mid-motion. She hesitated, then she answered. Yes." Rosalie's chest tightened. "What sacrifice?" Hanrei set the herbs down and finally faced her. "This is time travel," she said calmly. "The only way that it could ever truly work is with sacrifice." Rosalie stared at her. "The moment Celia crossed over," Hanrei continued, "there was always going to be loss. Time doesn't allow correction without payment," she said. Rosalie's voice wavered. Hanrei stopped her. She continued. "But there's also a gain." "Is there?" Rosalie interrupted. "No, not always," Hanrei said frankly. "But in this case, yes, there is." Rosalie looked back at the page, then slowly up at her again. "So, I will have Celia." Hanrei nodded. "Yes, but not by birth." Rosalie looked at her sharply. "It was the only way to keep her alive," she nodded again. "That's what you stressed is most important, right?" Rosalie's throat tightened. "And Minjae has to..." She stopped. Her eyes dropped to the floor. That's a big sacrifice." Hanrei exhaled softly, not in disagreement, in understanding. "Not really," she said.
He's been already living it. Rosalie looked up. He's lonely. He's debilitatingly lonely. He tries to throw himself into his work, which after all this long time is just stale and unsatisfying to him, Henri continued. That's why he clung to Celia in the first place. Not because she needed him, because he did. Rosalie met her eyes. The hardest part isn't the sacrifice, Henri said. It's getting him to believe that he will still have the life he always wanted after it. Rosalie's lips trembled. And if he believes that, will he truly have it? He'll truly have it, right? We both will be happy with the outcome of the sacrifice, right? Henri nodded once. Yes, this is not a trick. I gain nothing from misleading you. You must silence your doubts. And yes, he will make the sacrifice easily. All he has to do is walk into the veil when it opens, and he will join with his past energy, and Celia will carry the memories and his essence with her when she arrives. Silence settled between them. Rosalie looked back down at the page, her fingers tightening around the paper. She lifted a locket from the table and held it up between them. So this absorbs the energy? Rosalie asked. Yes, good energy, love energy, especially love that has already been chosen. Rosalie watched the locket carefully. Once we have all of the essences contained in here, yours, mine, his, and what Celia has already given, we will place it at the threshold. She set the locket down precisely where the chalk lines converged. The force will pull it in with her as the door opens, Henri went on. And when we close the door, it will be forced back with her. Rosalie frowned. But how will she hold it? She won't, Henri answered. Rosalie looked up sharply. Binge's mother will, Henri said. She finally met Rosalie's eyes. Binge's mother is serving two purposes. Henri raised one finger. First, she slows Celia down. Without her, Celia will hit the wall of time's force, head on. Rosalie inhaled sharply. She wouldn't survive that, Henri added, matter-of-factly. She raised a second finger. And secondly, she rides Celia energy long enough to retrieve the locket. Rosalie slapped back slowly. Oh, that sounds like a lot. Henri waved the thought away gently. The spirit world operates differently than ours, she said. What sounds overwhelming here is often very simple there. She turned back to the table. Once Binge sacrifices himself to connect with his past, the events of time will adjust and match to what has already happened. In order for it to be balanced, there cannot be two Binges or two Celias. Now, granted, it's not the end-all, be-all if he doesn't show up, but for there not to be any complications later, and for time and spirit to accept such drastic changes, a voluntary sacrifice confirms alignment and allows for a peaceful and blessed transition. Rosalie hesitated. That sounds practical. She swallowed hard. I guess. It is, Henri agreed. But it's not the end-all. She will live. We are just assuring that she lives a long and happy existence. Rosalie sighed and began twisting her hands again. Henri glanced up sharply. Stop fidgeting, she said, not unkindly, and practice the chant. Rosalie groaned softly. My Korean is fine. Henri tilted her head. Your chic sound is not. Rosalie let out a breathy laugh, rolling her eyes. Of course. It's always something. It's the vows, really, she muttered. She straightened her back and took a breath and began practicing again, slowly, carefully, her voice steady with each repetition. Henri returned to her work. The door remained closed, but not for much longer. The hour was closing in. Meanwhile, in 1995, Binge checked his watch again, then again, each glance making the seconds feel louder. He was in full bluster now, hands shaking as he fought with the jack beneath the car.
Eke marete. He snapped under his breath. Who in the world thought this was a good idea? The little jack creaked uselessly as he cranked it. When it finally lifted, it wasn't high enough. When he adjusted it, the car slipped, metal scraping, forcing him to start over. The faster he tried to move, the slower everything went. Tears burned hot and sudden, spilling down his face as he worked frantically. Pointless circles. He was moving, but nothing was getting done. Time kept ticking away. Chebal, Juwajujuseo, he yelled to the empty night sky. Please help me. His legs gave out. He slid down the side of the car, a wave of emotion crashing through him. The tears came harder now, unstoppable, streaking his cheeks as he pressed his forehead to his knees. Then, movement. Minjae looked up. A small fox stood in the middle of the road watching him. It approached slowly, unafraid. Minjae rose to his feet without thinking. He didn't move. Chincha, undopchi, he muttered. Just my luck. Seriously. The fox stopped. They stared at each other, stillness stretching between them. And then, headlights appeared in the distance. Minjae turned, lifting both arms, waving wildly. Yogyo! Yogyo! Here, please! The car slowed and pulled over. Minjae ran forward, breathless. In Korean, words tumbling out of his mouth. Juwajujuseo songsinim. Chigum bali kaya haldega esayo. Nijimian andeo. Please, sir. I have to get somewhere. I can't be late. The man nodded once, already unlocking the door, motioning for him to get in. Minjae grabbed what he needed off of the seat, checked the road once more, then shut the door and climbed into the car. The engine pulled away, and the fox was gone. Minjae leaned in the back of the seat, chest heaving, wiping his face with the back of his hand. He checked his watch. He was on his way now. Minjae is coming. The East is almost ready. There was 30 minutes left until the cutting time. Rosalie sat in the north very still. She knelt and bowed her head and whispered a short prayer for Thomas, not asking for anything, just acknowledging him. And she began to feel the warm presence wash over her, and she allowed herself to fall back into her center. She glanced up at the sky and smiled. She knew he was with her. When she finished, she carefully rechecked the herbs beside her. Then she sat cross-legged on the ground, hand resting on her knees. She waited. The north was ready. In the west, Wanji and Celia stood at the base of the hill. From where they were, it almost looked vertical, a brutal incline that swallowed the light. Celia tilted her head up and then down, and immediately winced, pain radiating through her body at the thought of even taking one more step. They started up anyway. Celia moaned with every movement, her legs wobbling violently. Wanji held her tightly. We need a motorbike, Celia joked weakly. Wanji shot her a look. I know, she added, breathless. I weigh about as much as a bag of wet clothes. They stopped. Celia sagged against her. What time is it? Wanji checked. It's 2:30, she said. Celia shook her head. You're going to have to go without me. I knew, Wanji said immediately. Absolutely not. There's no way I'm going to be able to climb this, Celia said, tears burning her eyes. I won't make it. You have to pick the herb, Wanji insisted. I knew. I can't do it. Celia's gaze dropped to her ring. Then she removed the necklace and the ring and began to focus. I knew. Animida. Don't do it, Wanji warned softly. It's the only way, Celia whispered. I can't use my magic fully. I'm not going to be able to climb. If I try to climb, I'll die. She swallowed hard. And if I don't do this, I'll die anyway. Wanji's voice broke. Songsin-nim, Charchukil koeo. She's going to kill me. Celia shook her head. I'll die if I try to climb. Tears fell freely now. She closed her eyes and began a soft chant. But nothing happened. She opened her eyes. See? It didn't work. Let's go. Kaja. Wanji tried to reach and help her up. Then Talia stopped. She inhaled slowly, deeply. She closed her eyes again, and this time she thought of Min-jae. The moment that he spoke the binding words, the way his voice steadied when he chose her. Celia refocused. When she spoke again, her Korean was perfect, clear, certain, aligned. The ring warmed instantly. Celia pressed them into Wanji's hand. "Take it," she said. Wanji felt the heat surge through her palm. Celia lowered herself onto the grass, breath shallow. "Please," she whispered. "Just go. Bali." Wanji hesitated. Then she turned and ran, breaking into a hard jog toward the top. The west was almost ready. In the south, Hanrei sat before the herb, eyes closed, calm and focused. She could feel it, the scattered energies all over the place, rippling widely across time, even from the other side. "Everyone calm down," she muttered. "Oh, you're trying to kill an old woman." She exhaled slowly and straightened, annoyed, fearful, unmoving. She remained stout. 10 minutes more remained. Wanji made it to the top and located the herb. She began organizing and placing everything just so. She got the locket and the ring into place, the excitement of it all rushing through her. She closed her eyes and steadied herself. The west was ready.
In 2025, Rosalie stood staring at the door. She didn't blink. Then, a knock. Min-jae. She was on her feet instantly, pulling the door open and ushering him inside before he could even speak a single word. Here, Rosalie said, already moving him into position. But then, Hanrei grabbed him by the hand and moved him to the side. Rosalie looked on, shaking with worry. Hanrei looked at him in his eyes and asked him directly, "Do you believe?" Min-jae looked down, his eyes darting right and then left. His eyes met hers. Then, without a word, Hanrei moved him into place before he could answer. It was all or nothing now. In 1995 in the East, Min-jae ran at top speed, his pulse pounding in his ears. He reached the site with his heart slamming in his chest, 12 minutes early. He dropped to his knees, hands shaking as he arranged the items. 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3, 2, 1. He breathed, and then he began the chant. The clock struck 3. He cut, and then he saw her, plain as you or me. His heart stopped. She stepped toward him, placed her hand gently on his shoulder, and said nothing. She only looked at him. Then she smiled and faded. Min-jae collapsed. He dropped to his knees, tears streaming down his face as his forehead hit the ground. His body shook with sobs he couldn't stop. He had seen her. Confirmation. More than he could bear. When they all returned home together, the silence said everything. Celia was barely holding herself upright. Her steps were slow, uneven, her face pale with exhaustion and pain. Rosalie's heart fractured at the sight of seeing her daughter like that. And Min-jae instinctively reached for her, steadying her, even as his own hands trembled. It hurt to look at her, but it had to be done. Hanrei said nothing as she gathered the herbs, her movements deliberate and careful, as if speaking might disturb the fragile balance that was already in place. Rosalie and Min-jae guided Celia to the back room and helped her lie down. The candle was relit and placed at her side, its flame steady despite everything. No one spoke, but everything was ready.
As the hour crept closer to midnight, the ceremonial field glowed softly under the night sky. Candles flickered in careful symmetry. Chalk lines held firm. The air itself felt expectant, thick, watchful. When Celia entered the space, leaning heavily on Wanji, her heart swelled painfully. She took in every face, her mother, standing rigid with fear and love. Hanrei, calm but focused, holding centuries of weight in her stillness. Wanji, who had carried her, supported her, stayed with her when her strength failed. Tears slipped freely down Wanji's cheeks. Though she never stopped moving, never stopped helping, Celia felt something settle in her chest. Whether it worked or not, no, it was working, she told herself. She was loved. Her eyes found Min Jae. He looked nervous but calm, not frantic, anchored, like someone who had stepped into something fully that was irreversible. And then she saw her. Min Jae's mother, standing close, quiet, very present. Warmth spread across Celia, gentle and reassuring. For the first time, she allowed herself to think. This will work, she thought to herself. Won Ji led her to the center of the circle and positioned her carefully in front of Min Jae. Celia's legs trembled, but they stayed upright. Min Jae never once looked away from her. He had seen too much, felt too much. He knew with absolute certainty that whatever happened next would change him forever. He closed his eyes briefly and mouthed the words that he needed to survive this moment. Magic is belief. I believe. I truly believe, he said to himself. Hanrei stepped forward. The clock clicked to 11:55. No matter what happens, Hanrei said clearly, her voice steady. Do not break this circle. Hold the line. Won Ji, Rosalie, and Hanrei moved into place together. The chant began. Min Jae's heart hammered violently in his chest as he took Celia's hand, gripping it like an anchor. He glanced up once. The moon hung high, clouds drifting slowly across its face. The air shifted, the wind stirred. The chant deepened, rose, then fell into its final cadence. And just as Min Jae leaned in, and he felt the warmth of his lips on hers, and just before he could fully get his hands fully gripped around her waist, and before he could feel the warmth of her lips on his, Celia vanished. The wind exploded outward. Candles bent violently, flames whipping sideways. The women dropped to their centers of gravity, bracing themselves as the force tore through the circle. Min Jae stood firm and held on as the wind began to whip. The clouds surged, swallowing the moon entirely. Darkness pressed in. Then, stillness. The wind stopped. The air fell flat. They all looked around. Then, nothing. Over in 2025, clouds rolled overhead, heavy and thunderous. Hanrei stood gripping Rosalie's hand so tight it hurt. Min Jae stood beside them, unmoving, his body rigid with terror. Hanrei glanced at him briefly and thought, You believe now, don't you? Lightning split the sky. A tear in the air opened right before them, bright and violent. Celia appeared, suspended for a moment, screaming, Mommy! Rosalie's voice broke as she shouted, Go back, sweetheart. I'm okay. Relax and let it take you back. Min Jae couldn't move. A single tear escaped him. Then, without even thinking, he reached toward the sound. The light collapsed. Celia was gone. The room was silent again. Seconds passed. Over in 1995, the moments that had passed felt longer than it really actually was. Rosalie's eyes filled, panic clawing up her throat. Hanrei squeezed her hand harder, grounding her. Do you feel her? Rosalie asked quietly. Hanrei shook her head, voice trembling. No, not yet. I don't yet. Min Jae hadn't moved an inch. Slowly, the woman's hands fell to their sides, while one hand raised to their mouths in disbelief. They stepped back. Hanrei gathered the strength to move forward to place her palm against Min Jae's back. She tried to speak, but no words came. Just as she forced the first syllable of his name, lightning struck again. The veil tore open with a violent crack, throwing them all to the ground. When they looked up, Celia stood there, pale, shaking, but alive. Thomas stood on the other side of her, Min Jae's mother on the other, both holding her arms, both smiling. Min Jae shattered. He rushed forward, dropping to his knees as Celia sagged into him, completely spent. He wrapped his arms around her, sobbing openly, kissing her cheek with a reverence that bordered on prayer. It worked. he cried. It worked. Around them, everyone broke. They all didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They all began hugging each other as they watched the couple embrace. Celia had survived. She lived. Meanwhile, in 2025, the room had returned to itself so completely that it was unsettling. No echo of thunder, no residual hum, just the sound of the city as it always had been. Henry looked around the room to Rosalie, and then she took assessment. Rosalie's breath hitched. The question burst out of her before she could even stop it. Did it work? Henry didn't answer right away. She just closed her eyes, listening. Not outward, but inward. It feels calm, she said slowly. Normal. Normal, actually. Yes. Tell me what you remember, she asked Rosalie. Rosalie frowned slightly. What do you mean? She thought for a moment. Then she spoke easily. Well, I lost my husband. He died in Korea. He slipped on a mountain when he fell and died. Henry's expression sharpened. And your child? She asked gently. Rosalie's hand drifted to her stomach out of habit. Oh, well, I lost my child in a pregnancy, she said. A miscarriage, not long after. Her voice didn't break. The pain was old, settled. I came to you afterward, Rosalie continued. I needed help. Not for myself, for a girl I met. Her name was Celia. Henry stayed very still. She wasn't my daughter by birth, Rosalie said softly. But she came to be my child anyway. She exhaled, almost smiling. Yes, it's funny how life does that. Henry shook her head once, slowly. But honestly, that's not quite how it happened, she said. You told me years ago that he was missing. Silence fell between them. Rosalie searched her own memory, her brow furrowing. The certainty that she just spoke with began to thin, fracture. I did, she said softly. Did I? They stared at each other, both realizing the same thing at the same time. Henry turned. Rosalie followed her gaze. Rosalie glanced around the room, suddenly aware of the quiet. Binge, wasn't he just here? Where did he go? And they both stood still, in wonder and awe. Henry didn't answer. Rosalie turned and stopped. But Binge wasn't there. No footsteps, no sound, no sense of departure, just absence. Rosalie's brow furrowed. Wasn't he just... She paused. The thought slipped away before it could fully form. Rosalie shook her head, unsettled but calm. I'm sorry, she said. I don't know. My memory is a little bit jumbled. Henry stepped closer and placed her hand steady on her arm. It's all right, she said quietly. But where is Celia? I should try to reach her, Rosalie asked. Then she reached for her phone and dialed. Hello? A voice. Celia? Are you okay? Where are you? Rosalie said. A beat. Yeah, Ma, of course I'm fine, Celia sang. Another pause. Her eyes lifted to Henry, confusion flickering, then easy. Of course. Of course you are, Rosalie echoed. Then, where are you? Ma. Binge and I are out looking for the perfect venue for your spoiled princess, enjoying the evening air at the same time. Why? She listened, smiled faintly. All right, Rosalie stuttered. Call me later when you're done, okay? She ended the call. The truth settling gently into place. Henry let out a shaky breath, something between relief and grief. It worked, she whispered. Rosalie nodded, tears spilling freely now. Thank God, it worked. Henry pulled her into an embrace. They stood there in the room, and the world steady around them once more. Time had not broken. It had remembered. The yard shop was quiet again. The shelves were back in order, bundles hanging neatly where they belonged. The air smelled of dried leaves and warm tea. Outside, the world moved along as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Wanji stood across from Hanrei, a cup of tea warming nearby. She watched Hanrei for a moment as she worked, calm, precise, unhurried. Then she spoke. "Song sing Neem," Wanji said softly. Hanrei looked up. "We worked so hard this week," Wanji continued. "It feels so strange to go back to normal after everything so rewarding." She hesitated, then smiled shyly. "I want to know everything now. I want to learn everything that you know, even more than before." Hanrei tilted her head, listening. "How did you ever get into this kind of work?" Wanji asked. "Helping people like this." Hanrei set her hands down and smiled. A real smile, gentle and distant, all at the same time. "Child," she said, "that story goes back a very long time." Wanji leaned forward. "Honestly, to my Songjae," Hanrei continued softly, "my one and only." Wanji's eyes widened. "Please," she said, "tell me everything." Hanrei's gaze drifted somewhere far beyond the shop, beyond the years. "Well," she replied, "it started like this." The story continues. Like and subscribe to see the story of how Hanrei began her mission of joining loves across time. Broken Line is next. See you there.